Zero diver. You know what? Can we skip this? NDAF. Perfect. Howdy, howdy. This is Mark Wheaton, and welcome to another episode of NDAF, space in which neurodivergent folks and their friends can talk all things spectrumy in any messy direction they want. With me as sometimes is my silent, never-speaking producer and engineer, Ken Plume. This week, we're speaking with author support specialist and book publicist Sarah Shaw. Sarah very kindly agreed to do the pod after I mentioned to her we'd heard from neurodivergent guests and listeners alike about the difficulties they'd faced with online promotion of their work. I got to know Sarah when I wrote 3 crime novels for one of her former employers, publisher Thomas & Mercer, and saw firsthand how successful she was at wrangling a myriad of authors and disparate titles. So grab a pencil and a notepad, as here's Sarah now, ready to share her hard-won secrets and tips on how to get your book out there when the last thing you want to do is get yourself out there. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I guess it's been a long time since we've spoken or seen one another.
It has.
Talked. So
it's good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
And you are in Seattle?
I am. Where are you at? You're in LA, right?
Yeah, it's pouring rain, so it feels like Seattle down here.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful and sunny up here, so we must have switched.
Yeah, I saw this morning in the LA paper, they were saying that there's some massive one of those like Pacific rivers coming to Los Angeles, but because you're having to rely on radar now because there's no national ocean, the weather service is gone, they like really have no idea what's coming the next 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
The future is upon us.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's a party. So for people who have absolutely no idea, which is everybody, we met when I was at Thomas & Mercer, and you did what at Thomas?
I was an author relations manager. So what I like to say is that I was the concierge through the publishing process. And I basically was a point of contact for authors. They had their editor who helped them through all the creation of the book and editing and all of that stuff. And I was there for everything else. So I was there to answer questions and everything, from royalties to marketing to publicity, all that kind of stuff. But also I was there to celebrate successes and plan events and do all the fun stuff. I had the fun job. I never had to tell anybody no. I just did all the good things.
And traveled and went to conferences. Yes. And when authors showed up in Seattle, we got tours of the Amazon.
And you got to meet my dog.
Moose, indeed. And get our pictures taken with Moose. So
yes,
that was a good time. So tell me a little about what you're doing now, what Booked on Social is.
Yeah, so I left Amazon Publishing about 1.5 years ago and decided to strike out on my own. I pretty much immediately started working with authors one-on-one, doing social media for them. So I've got about 3 or 4 authors that I've been working with over the past year where I take on their social media as them. And I take over the whole thing from Facebook, Instagram, a little bit of TikTok, whatever, but also taking on newsletters and planning bookstore events, things like that. And then just about 2 months ago, I launched Booked on Social on Facebook and Instagram, where my goal really is to empower authors to be confident on social media and really making social media accessible for everybody. So providing tips and tricks and different ways to engage your readers and make it so that social media isn't scary and that you feel excited to do your social media and excited to promote your books and engage with your readers instead of dreading having to be online.
I'll always dread being online. So I'm looking forward to finding out where this is going. I know some people locally here who do that kind of work for bands and for actors and talk about the difficulty of capturing bands' like attitude so that the fans recognize the voice of a musical group on Blue Sky. Like, can you talk a little about how you capture an author's voice? If you have 4 different authors, how you make sure each of the different voices are coming through on social media like that. I would find that impossible.
It's hard. It definitely can be difficult to do. But for me, I think a big piece of it is research. So before I start taking on anybody's social media, I'm going back through their socials to see how they respond to things. What are they saying? What are some key words that they like to use? Are they responding with laughing, emojis? Are they just, one word answers? Are they not responding at all and just kind of, hitting the like button? Making sure that I'm really looking at what their past has looked like and then kind of molding it from there. But I also make sure that I'm reading their books. So I know what type of books that they have created so that I can also be speaking to that as well and not just, hitting that like button and engaging, but also creating content that sounds like they've written it that sounds like that matches the tone of their books that they've created as well.
What is what author on social media, if they're engaging you in this process, what is the best case scenario? What is like, oh, that is what an author's profile needs to feel like for a reader of that person? Like, is it somebody who's engaging 30 times a day, 20? You're getting a sense of what they like. You're getting a sense of what they read. You're getting a sense of how they write. What is the effective way of that author you're working with communicating through you on social media?
I think it's different for everybody. And there's no cookie cutter answer to that question. I think everybody has a different formula that works best for them. And I have taken on accounts where they had in the past been posting, 4 to 5 times a week, and that really worked for them. And so we continued that. And then I had an account that hadn't posted at all in a couple years, and we went from scratch, and we wanted to kind of just test the waters and see what the readers wanted. And so we started out with 2 posts a week. And, when that was successful, then we're like, well, why don't we add a 3rd post? And we've sort of ramped up in that way, depending on platform too. So we started at the beginning and 2 posts were working on both Instagram and Facebook, but then Instagram ended up having more engagement. So we upped it on Instagram and kind of left Facebook where it was. And as Facebook kind of slowly started to ramp up, we then upped it over there. And so it's kind of, it's a testing process, really, I think. And seeing what works for your readership and not just a cookie cutter, like everybody has to post 5 days a week to be successful and engage with their readers.
The reason I reached out to you about this was in one of our first of this, whatever this is, I talked to Tony Healy, our good mutual friend of the Thomas and Mercer days. And he talked about when he came to Los Angeles and had a hard time with the videos. I don't know if you remember when we were doing the kind of intro to, and I was doing Fields of Wrath. He was doing, I think it was the first Harper Storm's Edge. He's going to kill me if I get the title wrong. But he was talking about how hard it was to do, how mentally exhausting it is, how difficult that process was. And I had the exact same experience. I could not talk to camera. I probably did 30 takes or something. It was very hard. And we kind of talked about that that's expected. But then I had a book a couple of years ago where they asked me to tape here. I probably did 70 takes of just trying to act natural. And it was a disaster. And it just couldn't do it. And it's still live out there on YouTube. And you're just trying to do the best imitation of yourself. Quote, good old Ben Folds. Could you talk a little about, I guess, as we kind of get into this, for neurodivergent writers that are asked to do the same thing as neurotypical writers, starting with the video stuff, what's a good way to approach that kind of thing? Because readers at this point kind of want that sort of face-to-face intimacy and interaction and interface with an author.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the mindset that you need to meet social media where you're at. When it comes to the videos that you're creating, like you did with Thomas and Mercer and stuff, I think the biggest thing is to be proactive in letting the people who are doing the video know that this is not comfortable for you, and tell them why. Because I think that there are different ways to get around having to just sit in front of the camera and speak when that's not comfortable. Maybe it's cutting it down into smaller pieces so that it's just, you're doing one sentence at a time, and it's, okay, this is my book and I really want you to read it. And then hitting the pause button. And then, okay, what are we going to say next? Okay, here's one more sentence, something like that. When it comes to social media, though, I think there are so many ways around having to just stand in front of the camera and be like, this is my book. Come read my book, right. And that may work for some people, but if that doesn't work for you, that is not the only recipe for success. One of the greatest things that I've seen actually in this last year on social media is that there's this rise in people having such success with faceless social media. So that means making video, but not even being in the video themselves, or just having a video of just their hands typing on the keyboard and then doing a voiceover on that video of whatever they want to say, or putting a caption on the screen of what they want to say. So there's not necessarily this need to be standing in front of the camera. There are ways around having that face-to-face, having to, feel like you're on the spot, having to say something. You can create content without having to do that. And it's just as engaging and just as fun for readers to see doing those other things. And you can make a reel out of just a straight photo by using effects too. So there are ways around that where you don't need to be just sitting in front of a camera.
Yeah, that was literally my question. Is it as effective to see someone and hear the voiceover? It's the same amount of engagement?
Absolutely.
Or do you have to tell the readers, is it better to be, as you say, proactive and tell the readers, I can't do this. I can't do the video, so this is what you're getting?
No,
Is
I don't
that
think
an
you need
effective
to at
strategy?
all.
Okay.
No, I think, like I said, meet social media where you're at. And if this is what you're comfortable doing, it's going to be more authentic to your readers too. Because when you're doing something that you're not comfortable with, it's going to come across whether you want that to or not. I've had a lot of experience with that because
I can imagine.
I am an extreme introvert, and you may not be able to tell that a lot of the times, but like it's taken me a while to get where I'm at with social media, where I'm comfortable doing some things. And so really it's just, there have been so many times where I've just kind of sat there and like not know what to do or what to say. And, when I finally do make a video, that has come across. And, I look back at my old videos and I'm like, I looked nervous and I didn't seem like my genuine self. But when I have learned how to create things that are maybe a little bit different and more within my comfort zone where I actually feel good about doing it, that comes across more authentic and I get a lot more engagement on those posts. And I found the faceless ones do just as well for me, if not better sometimes, than the ones where I'm just sitting in front of a camera and speaking.
I remember specifically Moose would do Instagram. There would be, oh boy, I got to meet this author today.
Yes.
And it would be in the voice of Moose. Was that your kind of first turn at creating an avatar for your own? Okay.
Yes. That was how I taught myself how to do video content on social media. I practiced with him first and just, I learned how to, do captions and how to do voiceovers and all of those things and became comfortable with it on his account first. And then I started practicing on my own. So yes, practice on your dog's account first.
Oh, the avatar for this podcast is a talking cat. My face is nowhere near this and animates my cat opening its mouth and talking in the promos.
I love it.
So there is not, this $1 million right here is never on screen. So
That's too funny.
It works for me. How though do you tell, part of it is saying, yes, there are workarounds to video, but for neurodivergent authors, advocating for themselves is just as hard. How do you tell a publisher that? How do you say, when you're feeling very beholden, how do you tell a publisher when you're terrified of doing something to interrupt a marketing blitz? Say it's your first book. Say it's your first time ever out there. Is there a way, and I guess that goes far beyond publishing, if this is where it's really the rubber's hitting the road, how would you suggest you advocate for yourself to a publisher like that? When advocating yourself is the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, being honest. I think recognizing and normalizing that social media, you need to adjust social media and video and everything to fit who you are and fit your brain, not forcing yourself into a neurotypical mold. And that's something to try to convey to your publisher, that this is who you are and that this is what you're comfortable with, and letting them know that this is where you're at. I think a lot of people, they get these requests from their publishers to do more social media, do more video, hey, we want to film this with you, that, and the other, but we're afraid to say anything. And you're not comfortable with it, but it's like, hey, well, I'm going to do it because they want me to do it. But this is not something I'm comfortable with. Whereas if you were to say something and be like, listen, I have autism. I don't feel like this is something that I'm comfortable doing. Is there a workaround? Is there something we could do instead that would still convey the same message, that would still get the same results, but that I maybe would feel more comfortable with? I think, if somebody were to tell me that and I was still working at a publisher, I would absolutely be like, oh my gosh, thank you for telling me. I would absolutely find a workaround. Let's see what we can do to maybe do this instead. That doesn't have you feeling stressed out and overwhelmed about it. So I think it's stepping up and saying something.
Yeah. And this is the example I've used before when I did this book come out for Hodder and Stoughton. They sent me an entire packet on social media and what I was supposed to do. And it was like, post twice a week on Instagram, like something. You have to do it twice a week for the year and a half leading up to the book coming out. I went all over the world and posted 1,400 photos of public art, murals from Dublin, from Hawaii, like everywhere I would go, I'd post these pictures. I never mentioned the book once. That was a mistake. I did the letter of the law because I couldn't tell them. I didn't feel comfortable talking about myself, about writing, about the book itself. I couldn't sell the book. I felt horrible, like shameful to promote this book. Like you're asking for people, and it just felt grotesque. But they had asked a question. post like this many times. So I fulfilled to the letter of the law. It didn't sell a single book, I'm sure. How could it possibly have? So the links you will go, the compensatory strategies you'll go to avoid interacting. I am an example of those extreme levels you'll go to never advocate, to never tell a publisher no, because you're worried about not getting the next book. And it doesn't help. So it's an issue. To that, advocating for yourself, how would you say also with cold calling people, with signings, with wanting to do panels at conferences, about asking for blurbs? There's all these other social interactions that become one-on-one that aren't with your publisher, but are with strangers, people whose work you like, people who are running the panels at important conferences where you'd be great on a panel. You'd have something to say and you'd sell 50 books. Are there strategies you would recommend for people who find that kind of thing just impossible to do? Should you use a template which feels impersonal, or what would you recommend for social interactions that are outside of working with your publisher?
Yeah, I mean, I think templates are fantastic. That's one of the things that I really stress with people is that if you don't feel comfortable doing something on the fly, have a template, have things written down. I mean, if that's going to make you feel better, that's going to also make you sound better too, because you're going to be comfortable and not stressed out. I think you can also, again, be honest, when you're on a panel, making sure the moderator knows how you feel and what this is for you, and that, maybe there are workarounds that they can help with as well in terms of, maybe it's certain questions that you are already prepared for. They tell you in advance that, hey, Mark, these are the questions that I'm going to ask you. You can be prepared, have your template ready. And so it's not something that you're on the fly and having to think about when you're there. Signings, I think, are another one it's fun to have a signing, and, readers love meeting their authors. But if that's not comfortable for you too, that I don't know that it's necessary to do. I think conferences and signings and all of that are great. Readers love all those kinds of things, but they don't necessarily move the needle in terms of book sales. So if it's not something you're comfortable with, I don't think you absolutely need to do it. But if they are something that you really want to do, then I would be honest with the people who are putting them together so that maybe they can also help you come up with strategies that will make you feel more comfortable in the space.
I really like what Chuck Tingle does with his public appearances. He wears a pink pillowcase over his head. It's almost like a mask, and large sunglasses. Yeah. And it's like I'm forgetting his name. He's in Cabaret now, but the country singer who wears the mask. And it's very effective. No one knows what either look like. It works really well. And obviously it makes them very comfortable in a public sphere. So I guess that
makes you feel comfortable, then that's great.
I hadn't even thought of that, because pre-scripting is such a big, helpful thing that you just use in day-to-day life. If going into conferences and just being able to pre-script just a little bit with a list of questions, especially if you're able to bounce off, if you have like 8 responses ready and 2 of them get thrown to you, you're right. I think that would really help a great deal.
Absolutely. As
far as social media, I mean, that's obviously the big one. And that's never going to be easy because there's a lot of second guessing. There's a requirement of putting yourself out there. If you have a book, if you've already published, if the book is coming out, but you don't want to talk about it, in my case, I'm just going to use myself as an example, and I guess Tony and Dan as well. And it's just not something you feel compelled to talk about because you did it. You're done. It's like there's certain filmmakers who don't want to do director commentaries on the DVDs because they're like, that's the thing. Why should I talk about it? That is the product. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. People want the information. What's a good strategy for looking at that next year and a half of social media for you if that's what readers are going to want? What if it is something that they will move the dial, will sell books?
Yeah, I like to tell people to use the 80-20 rule when it comes to promoting books. And unless it's like right at your launch time, then I think it's like you go all in on the book. But when it comes to, after you've published that year or so after or around your book publication, I think it's best to do 80% of your content being nothing to do with your book at all. So having that be, maybe you're doing a behind the scenes of your writing process, or maybe it's a quote of some kind every week, a meme, a writing meme. You can repurpose somebody else's content and post that as your own for a writing meme, something like that. You can do a bunch of stuff that's not anything to do with your book, but this is going to make you relatable and, make your readers get to know you better, and a lot of engagement pieces in that. You can just pose a question to your readers even, and that's great. I mean, just having a single post that has a question gets a bunch of comments and engages your readers. And then that 20% should be your book promotion. And that, again, doesn't have to be you standing in front of a camera saying, buy my book. That can be, maybe you're posting your top reviews, or you're reading an excerpt, or maybe you're reading a couple sentences from one of your chapters each week, or something like that, to give people a little insight into what your book is about, why people are excited about it, and not just saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, here's my book, you should like my book, like all of those things. There's so much more to book promotion than just telling people to buy your book. There's letting them know why other people like it and what's in it for them.
What's the best way to, again, I used to post like a positive review, and then like within 10 minutes, and Ken can absolutely, I would delete it. I'd just be like, it's that cookie seeking behavior. It's that Paul Poppy syndrome thing. I would delete it to the point that if I got enough followers, I'd delete the whole social media. I used to delete Twitter every 6 months and wait the 30 days and salt the earth if people started engaging with me, because I didn't have the mental space for it, especially the idea of saying, look, somebody said something nice about my work, and that was anathema to me. I couldn't do it. Is that when you just say it's never going to happen, I need someone else to do it? Is that the point where you just say, I need to hire somebody else because this will never work? Or is there a way to engage with that?
That's a hard one. I mean, if you're not comfortable with it, you're not comfortable with it, and I can tell you, over and over again, like, just do it. You're going to be fine. Yeah. But if that's not the case, then yes, maybe that's time for you to hire somebody. And that's why, people like me exist. One of my clients that I took on last year, she's older and just does not feel comfortable on social media at all, and hates promoting herself and stuff too. But when she first hired me, that was her biggest thing, was like, I don't want to do this. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel comfortable. I need somebody else to do it for me. But my publishers are just like down my throat about having to be on social media and promote myself. And so that's why she came to me, and there are people out there. There are a bunch of people out there like doing what I do, and it can help, and maybe there are some things that you are comfortable posting and you stick with those posts yourself, but you can also hire somebody to do those book promotion things for you. You don't have to hire somebody to do all of it, though you can if you want to.
How closely do you work with her? Like, do you say, this is the week where it's kind of this? Does she approve or post before they go up? When there's a book coming out, well, what is that interaction like with an author who just wants no part of it?
Yeah, there's very little interaction actually. So when we first started out, I kind of came up with a strategy of what I thought I wanted to do. And, this is the author that I started out with just 2 posts a week, and then we ramped up. And so I came up with kind of a strategy that I pitched to her of, I want to start out with these 2 posts a week. These are the topics I want to post about. Once we get enough engagement, these are the things I want to post about. And she gave the okay on that. And then from there, I gave her an update every 2 weeks, and I let her know, what's working, what's not working. And then I also provide her a snapshot of what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. I do like a screenshot of my content calendar so that she can see, what's being posted over the next couple of weeks. And that gives her the opportunity to say, hey, don't post that, or that looks great, or whatever. She's never said no to anything that I've done, but it gives her the opportunity to, check out what I'm doing and make sure that sounds okay and everything. So she's pretty hands off in that respect. Yeah. If there is something that she wants me to post or wants me to, keep in mind or have on my radar, then she just shoots me an email and lets me know. I also work closely with her publisher though. So when she had a book launch in September, and around her book launch, her publisher had content they wanted me to post. So they sent me graphics and video and stuff like that I scheduled onto her social media. And they would let me know when there was, a Goodreads giveaway or a different promotion or something like that, so that I would be able to post about those things as well. So I've had more interaction actually with her publisher in terms of content than I have with her.
Sounds like the best, like the gold standard best option for anyone in this space. That's pretty great. Does she do public appearances? And do you help her with public appearances, or she doesn't do public either? No conferences or no signings?
She doesn't do conferences. She's not into those at all, but she did a small book tour around her launch that her publisher set up one. And she says that was plenty to do. I think it was like 4 or 5 book events. And she's like, that's all I need for now. And next launch, we'll see what we do. But yeah, she's not one to go to conferences, and that's not her jam.
Did you work with her on that, like deciding what part of a book she'd read? Like, did you help her with that, or was that not part of the gig? Was it only social media?
No, that was, she has a full-time publicist. And so they were planning that event or those events for her. But I do have another author that I did do a mini book tour for this last year, where I did all the planning for all of those. So reaching out to the bookstores and securing those, making sure they had all the books, and then working with the author on, what kind of format we wanted to do in terms of, do you want to just sit up there and read an excerpt, or do you want to have somebody moderate with you and do like a Q&A sort of format? And we landed on Q&A because that just seemed the most natural. And then I brought in other authors to then do the moderation at these different events. And then after the author chat, we called it, then she did like a short signing at the end.
So in that way, you're more acting as a publicist. If you're reaching out, if you're arranging the full, what author is going to be there for the Q&A city by city. So this means you have to have a Rolodex. Or are you accessing their contacts, or are these your contacts that you're using?
Mostly my contacts. Yeah. Yeah, I do a little everything.
Great. I mean, this all sounds amazing. This I almost wish I had a book coming out. Go back to talking about kind of burnout that can happen with social media, and when it's kind of too late to move into this. There are people who do social media like crazy in the author space, but are probably doing it either poorly or working against themselves. And I see this a lot. I see people being too personal. I'm seeing people in the neurodivergent space who but it's personal for me, where I'm like, oh my God, I would never post that. And then it's hard to understand that balance. Do you see things that authors are doing, neurodivergent or not, that you feel are ultimately hurting them in the social media space?
Yes and no. Again, I think, social media is so personal to each person, and I think some people do share a lot of personal. Some people don't like to share personal, but I don't think it hurts one way or the other, and it may not be what like I would personally do or what I would feel comfortable doing. But if they're comfortable doing that and that makes them feel better and that they're connecting with their followers that way, then more power to you, And I think it's just really what each person feels comfortable doing and and if it's working for them engagement wise, then that's great. I don't think it hurts in any way.
Right.
Like I haven't seen an account where I'm like, ooh, wow, they really should not be doing that. I think everybody, if you're comfortable with what you're doing, it's going to come across as natural, and that's what you should be doing. What I do think hurts is when you have somebody, like, let's say there's an author who sees another author, sees other authors doing something on social media, and they're like, oh, I see them and they're really successful at that. I have to do that too. They're doing these dancing videos and, lip syncing and, whatnot. And they're getting so much, response for that. I must have to do that too. That's when I see that it doesn't work because they're forcing something that they're not comfortable with. And that shows. So that's the only thing that I would say is like, don't feel you have to do things that other people are doing. That's not the only recipe for success out there.
You talked a little about what was successful, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Blue Sky, whether it's Instagram. How do you feel about TikTok and Book Talk in specifically? I know that Book Talk, especially for the book clubs, has been such a big mover to the point that TikTok is now getting involved with different of the major national book clubs and getting involved with major national publishers. And that almost seems to be a bigger window, maybe not, as a way to get books out there, books sold, not necessarily books read. How do you feel about TikTok and Book Talk when having authors try to, promote themselves to very specifically, not wide readers, but Book Talk in specific?
Yeah, Book Talk is huge. And they've definitely seen this like huge rise in the past few years. And TikTok is great for promoting books. Like this is, it's fun actually to see this rise in Book Talk because Book Talk is actually helping bookstores. You're seeing this rise in physical book sales because of the fact that Book Talk is so huge.
Oh, they can hold them up. Yeah.
Yes. Everybody wants the physical book now. During the pandemic, everybody was reading Kindle, and that was great. And that was a great rise for Kindle books. But now everybody has to have that physical book, and they want to show off their bookshelf, and they want to show off their book collection. And so this is really great in that sense and everything. And TikTok is also amazing for authors who love to be in front of the camera. It is not a great space to be.
Right.
If you don't, because TikTok is so reliant on face-to-face camera. Instagram, I think you can do a lot of things faceless, and you can do, aesthetic video and stuff like that instead. TikTok is really reliant on being face to face in that way. And so I have seen a lot of authors who are just really extroverted and really love that kind of thing have huge success on that platform. And they're getting in front of millions of people. But, that's not for everybody. That's definitely not something that everybody's comfortable with. What is great is that there's this huge rise in book talkers or book influencers on there as well. And that's a thing where, maybe you're not comfortable being on video, but if you can get your book in the hands of one of the book talkers, that's a great way to promote your book as well. So maybe you're not the one having to talk about your book, but if somebody else is doing that, then that's great too. There are so many out there that love to promote different books and different genres. And you can go on there and just type in, book talk mystery, book talk romance, book talk this. And there's just so many of them out there, and they all love to interact with authors. And I'm actually working on an influencer campaign right now with an author where we're reaching out to bookstagrammers and book talkers and getting them involved in a campaign that we're doing. And so there's tons of opportunity out there to get your book in video content on TikTok without having to do it yourself.
And are these book talkers that this author has worked with before, or are you just are you cold streaming out to people like that?
I am cold streaming out to people.
So if there is video content that you're making for one of your 3 or 4 authors that you're working with where they're not on camera, TikTok, what do you do? What is a good faceless video strategy for TikTok?
Well, I don't do any TikTok content personally, because I do very much believe that the best content on TikTok is face-to-face.
Right.
But I do reels on Instagram for authors. And so when it comes to faceless content over there, I love to do memes. Memes are great. They're hugely successful, and they're really easy to remix. If you find a meme you like on Instagram, let's say it's something funny it doesn't even have to be book related. It can be somebody, excited about something, and then you hit a button to remix, and then you can put your own caption at the top, and you're like, so excited, my book's coming out in 10 days or whatever. You can easily remix something that, in 2 seconds to make a great video, and they go over really well. Another thing I love to do is I like to make little book trailers. Canva is a great program for making content, and they have a lot of little video snippets. And so I have an author who had a book come out a month ago, and it was all about kind of a family on the run. And the FBI is after them, but also, there's a killer after them as well. And they're on the run because the FBI thinks they did something that they didn't do. And so I made just a short little snip video of there's a little clip of a FBI agent, looking at something. And then there's a car going down the road, and then something else. So it's putting together little pieces of, it's a 10-second video, but it's highlighting what's in the book.
Right.
So little things like that.
So I see book trailers all the time. I'm constantly getting hit with the instant messenger saying, let me do a book trailer for you. And I'm like, I haven't had a book come out in years. I don't even know why you're hitting me up. What makes perfect book trailer? Is it 10 seconds? Is it just other images? How do you compete with all these? You can tell AI book trailers right away, which you're kind of okay, so not that. So what makes the really workable 10-second spot? What's the best way to get that book in front of somebody? Yeah,
I'm a big believer in short and sweet. So I don't think it needs to be long. You don't need a 30-second video or anything like that. I think 7 to 10 seconds is the sweet spot. And, having your video be maybe 2 to 3 clips of just, whatever is pertinent to your book, but then doing a caption over the top of, maybe you have taglines for your book that your publishers provided, stuff like that. Putting those on there. So it's showing a family on the run, blah, 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 whatever. And that gets that excitement. And then audio is a big piece too. So making sure you have the proper music that's playing in your trailer as well. So if this is a suspenseful book, then you want to have suspenseful audio that kind of gets people excited and like, oh, maybe like their heart starts pumping when they're watching this video. If it's, a lighthearted romantic comedy, then you want it to be, light and fluffy and people are like, oh, that looks fun. It's kind of getting all these pieces put together. And it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be long, just that short, sweet video. I think those are the most impactful.
When I wrote you, and you very nicely agreed to be on this podcast, you mentioned that you are doing a number of posts in March leading up to World Autism Awareness in April. I had this vague awareness that there is an Autism Awareness Month for autistic people. And I'm always like, oh, I'm aware of my autism. Don't worry about it. So I have a weird everything to that. What are these things? What are the things that people who may be dipping their toe in for the first time and see Booked on Social, what are you telling people in the neurodivergent community about what they can do? Even if they're not authors, even if this is something they're getting into for the first time, what is this that you are tackling with this?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, like my biggest goal for Booked on Social is making social media accessible. And, I want to provide tips and tricks and workarounds and ways that people can go from feeling super overwhelmed and with sensory overload and just this is not for me and wanting to give up on social media to having fun with it and feeling confident. And so I want to speak to a few different things over the next month. One is, alternatives to being in front of video, like we've talked about, just ways that you can make faceless content, ideas for, templatizing things, ways to do voiceovers, text-based reels, like that kind of thing that you can still be wildly engaging, but not have to be on video yourself. Also talking about how to take away some of that overwhelm by scheduling and batching things all at once. So maybe not having to do everything every day. I think that's a recipe for driving yourself crazy and just complete overwhelm is sitting in front of your computer every day trying to come up with content. I like to batch all my content personally, and I do that for all my authors as well. And I schedule it, I'll schedule my time for creating content, and that sometimes works and that sometimes doesn't. Sometimes I'm just like, I am not feeling creative today. And that is not a creative day for me. And so I'll push that off to a day where I'm feeling a little bit more high energy and have the brain space to create content. But giving those tips on how to successfully batch your content, coming up with content ideas, and then coming up with your plan of what you want to post so that you can be consistent. Doing that ahead of time so that you're not sitting there thinking every time, like, what am I going to post? Coming up with maybe content pillars so that you can say, every week I'm going to do 3 posts. Those are my 3 things I'm going to do every week. One post is going to be a book review. One post is going to be behind the scenes, right? Or what I'm doing with my writing right now, what I'm working on, stuff like that, or writing tips and tricks. And then my third one is always going to be a question to my readers. And that way, this is what you're doing every week. You don't have to come up with other content. Each week, you can plug a new review into one of them. You can plug a new question into there for your readers. And maybe you're even using the same video for your behind the scenes author content. And you just reuse that same video over and over again, but you put different text on top of it. I want to provide ways to make things easy, to make it accessible where you can do it the same every week, because I think consistency is so much greater than quantity. It's getting that process in place and being able to do it over and over again. So those are kind of the main things that I want to touch on over this next month, but also touching on like sensory overload as well, and just ways to combat the sensory burnout of social media as well, of being online, feeling you need to be online every day, tips and tricks on using dark mode for your phone or your computer, making sure you're in a quiet space when you are creating content. Maybe you're wearing noise canceling headphones, limiting your time online to, maybe it's 10 to 15 minutes a day, where that 10 to 15 minutes is where you're liking and commenting on what people have, said on your post, and then your timer's done and that's it. You're not scrolling all hours of the day and night, which is so easy to do, So yeah, those are the things I really want to touch on this next month as I lead into Autism Awareness Day.
You're never going to go wrong by getting a neurodivergent person and saying, with this routine, follow this routine and success at the end. I love a routine. I love a schedule. So, but that's where I go overboard, where it's just like on Goodreads, I was watching it start to dictate Like I had to read books all the time. I got to 2,500 reviews because I was just consuming.
Oh my gosh.
That was my social media. I was just consuming so many books. I read so much. And so I finally had to delete all of those 2,500 reviews because it was controlling my day. It was controlling my month because I'd be like, I must read enough books in order to achieve that. And I had the overload of I'm using social media too much with Goodreads and I just can never go back. So that I find where my own frontiers are by doing things horribly. So
live and learn.
So now, yeah, I pull the internet all the time. I just turn off the internet in the house when my wife isn't here. So it works great for me. As far as what's coming next, are there things that you're really excited about? I know Book Talk is not new, but it's still like kind of like, seeing how much this can be enabled to sell books. Is there some other platform? Are there things that you're seeing that people are gravitating to away from Goodreads to Storygraph, trends like that, where you're excited to explore with your authors as another way of interacting with readers?
Yeah, I mean, TikTok's definitely a big one. I like to get authors on there if they're comfortable, but again, that's not for everybody, and I haven't had a lot of luck getting people over there yet. So, but yeah, no, I'm definitely seeing a big move from Goodreads to different platforms, and there's a lot of them out there now that I'm starting to explore myself. Storygraph being one of them. There's Fable.
Fable? F-A-B-L-E?
Fable.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't know it at all.
I don't know. I'm just starting to see them online on people mentioning them on Instagram and TikTok and stuff. So I'm starting to explore those different things. I'm currently using Storygraph myself alongside Goodreads because I'm not ready to give that up yet. But yeah, it's neat to see these different platforms and what they're offering. Storygraph is great because it not only, does all the same, tracking the books you're reading and allowing you to give reviews and stuff like that, but it also gives you a lot of data. So it's telling you, how many pages you've read overall, how many pages you read it per month, what types of books you're reading. It gives you like graphs and all these different
I know, but
things.
that's stuff I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know that I only read depressing, slow moving. I was like, I don't need to know that I only read slow moving, like dark books from Europe. I was like, thanks, Storygraph. I appreciate it. So, wow, you got me, but still, thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot. If you're a data person, it's a great app. So
yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah, but I think there's potential for that too. I think people are still using Goodreads a lot for like with publishers and such. Interested to see how this transitions over the next few years as these other sites start taking off. Are publishers going to switch to that and start using, are there going to be giveaways on Storygraph like they do on Goodreads? Are they going to translate into online reviews as well, where you see Amazon has Goodreads reviews on their detail pages as well? Are different publishers going to showcase Storygraph reviews or Storygraph ratings on different detail pages? It'll be interesting to see, what takes off and what doesn't.
Especially because right now, because it's not Amazon owned like Goodreads, there feels like there's a real grassroots authenticity to Storygraph. Yeah. Also because all the time when they're like looking for a book and you don't even see the cover yet. You see just kind of the little thing they generate. So you have this kind of feeling of authenticity there. But like all things, how do you feel about people when you build up like a giant Twitter following and you have all these readers who know you on Twitter, and then politically it's like, a lot of your readers don't want you to be on Twitter anymore. Or a lot of your readers don't want you to work with Zuckerberg's Facebook anymore or Instagram. How do you react to this ever-shifting sand of social media where you might have spent years getting a following, but now Twitter, for instance, or X is too toxic for certain of your readers to ever go and interact with you there? How do you deal with the moment where you realize I have to drop 50,000 followers because I can't be in this space anymore?
Yeah, and that's such a hard one, and especially in the climate that we're in right now, I'm seeing that on a lot of things.
You are on the spot and have to answer this absolutely.
I know,
perfectly.
I'm trying to be politically correct.
Yeah.
I think if you've built up this huge following and you still have followers on the platform and you still want to post on the platform, I think you should absolutely still do that. But if you're feeling a lot of pressure and maybe you don't want to post on that platform anymore for XYZ reason, your readers are going to be somewhere else, and it's finding out where they are. So maybe it's testing the waters on Facebook. Maybe it's testing the waters on Instagram, seeing if that's where your readers are and finding out, what's going to work for you for your next step. I don't think you need to be on every platform. I think that's a huge myth out there that everybody's like, you need to be on every platform all the time. I think it's figuring out what works for you and where your readers are at. And that may fluctuate. That may be at one point in time, maybe X was the big thing, but now people are gravitating towards Instagram instead or Blue Sky or what have you, and it's kind of rolling with the times, and maybe X will be a big again and you'll gravitate back to that at some point in time and your following will come back, but it's adapting to the moment.
When I was at World Horror in 2011, I took one of those writers seminars with the truly great horror author, Brian Keene, who I adore. And he told a story about when he had his first New York Times bestseller and he was going on the Howard Stern show. And that was obviously a huge get for an author. And he got there and the publishing company had not even sent books. They were like, oh, hi, yeah, your book. And he had to book it across Manhattan to an open Barnes & Noble or whichever bookstore it was, grab the books and run it back. And I've never forgotten that story because I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course the books would be there. And then you go through it a few times and you're like, no, there is a requirement on the authors. The author does have to not necessarily push the cart a little bit, but is responsible, has a certain responsibility to their own marketing and publicity. What would you tell first-time author who's never done this before, who's just coming into the space with their first book, which is getting a national brick and mortar, like top 5 release? What should they expect from the publisher? What should they expect to do themselves, especially when it comes to social media, but anything they might think, oh no, the publisher takes care of that. And you're like, no, that's not the case at all. Where is the line? What should they expect and what should they have to expect for themselves to do as a first-time starting out author?
As a first-time author, one, it's going to depend on who your publisher is because I think different publishers do different things. But what I'm seeing across the board is that you're going to have at least a little bit of marketing from your own publisher. That does not include social media most of the time. So you're going to be responsible if you want to do social media marketing, and most of the time your publisher is going to ask you to do that, but that's going to be on you. What they're going to be focusing on more is promotions. I know with Amazon, the marketing team is more pushing things like, daily deals of backlist titles or daily deals of any of your titles, monthly deals, getting you into different promotions on Amazon. I know other publishers are doing the same thing, trying to work with Barnes & Noble and, different bookstores to have different promotions and that kind of thing as well. Setting up Goodreads giveaways, partnerships like that. And if you're very lucky, you may get a publicist with your publishing deal, but not everybody does.
Let's say you don't. Let's say it's on you.
Yeah. If it's on you, then, if you feel confident, doing your own publicity, maybe you get arcs for your book and, you feel confident, getting them in the hands of the right people. That's great. But you also, you can hire that out. There are freelance publicists. I do that sort of thing as well. I do art campaigns and, there are people who can support you if your publisher does not offer those kinds of services. So do what you can and do what you're comfortable with, but don't feel like you have to take on everything yourself. There are resources out there to help you if you're a first-time author and you don't know what to do.
And if I can ask before our hour is out, what are you reading right now? What do you like right now? What's the best thing you've read in the last year? That kind of stuff. Like, what is really exciting to you right now, writing-wise?
Oh boy. I've been a thriller girl through and through my whole life. Like, I've always loved a good thriller. But things have changed for me lately, which is a little strange for me because it kind of caught me off guard. I guess it was in November, December time, one of my favorite thriller authors, Rachel Hall, she decided to write a romantasy. And that's the big thing right now. Everyone loves a good romantasy out there. And, I've always loved her thrillers. And so I was like, well, I mean, I should read this because it's her and, but I'm probably not going to like it because I don't read romantasy. That's not my thing. I freaking loved it. And I was like, oh my God, what have I been missing out on?
Yeah. Right.
And so I immediately dove down the rabbit hole of romantasy, and I have been reading romantasy/fantasy for the last couple of months now. And I'm currently reading, cannot remember the name because I just flipped onto it on Kindle last night, but It's the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas.
Yeah.
Down that rabbit hole. But I love it.
A popular rabbit hole. So, yeah.
Yes, it's a very popular rabbit hole, but I love it because it's such an escape. You know, like I have read some really dark, murdery things for years.
Right.
And this is such a different thing for me to have a book that I feel like I'm escaping into a whole new world, especially in our world that we live in right now that's so needed, where I can curl up every night and read these books where I'm just taken away to somewhere else. And I'm really enjoying that. And so
fantastic.
I have a whole TBR of fantasy now to read, and it's great.
Thank you for doing the show today. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your insights and your ideas. I really appreciate you being on, and I really hope people, and I know people will get a lot out of our conversation. See, that's this is the real thing.
My pleasure.
See, for you, that's easy. For me, I'm like, it's hard to know what to say when it's not pre-scripted and when it's not a more in-depth conversation about something. Like, it's why I can't even say hi to like other parents at the schoolyard, because it's repetitive every day. Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? How's the weather? Hi, how are you? Can't do it. So
there you go.
And that was Sarah Shaw. Hopefully you found that as insightful and beneficial as I did. For more from Sarah, you can check her out at bookonsocial.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/bookedonsocial, as well as on Instagram at instagram.com/bookedonsocial. If you have a book or comic or movie you've written or anything else that requires you to be a public face, I highly recommend perusing her videos and posts on her Instagram, as they're chock full of great information. But if you do all that and are still throwing your hands up in the air at the task, you can also just reach out to Sarah and let her help you with all things social media. Until next time, this has been NDAF. NDAF. NDAF is produced by Ken Plume, and our theme song is by Mike Furman.